But everyone realizes now that the Titanic cannot be saved. The last wooden lifeboat is about to be lowered. Colonel Astor is waving goodbye to his wife. He's not allowed to board. With more than 1,500 passengers still left, the crew has formed a protective circle around the lifeboat so that only the women and the children can take the last few seats. Colonel Astor rushes to the kennels where his dog Kitty is kept. He sets all the dogs free so they will not be trapped. Michael and Edmund Navertil are still on the ship. Their father has wrapped them in blankets to keep them warm. Their only hope of escape is in the last collapsible boat about to be launched. Their father pushes forward and hands them to the woman sitting on the boat. Then he steps into the crowd. The music has stopped now, but the ship's lights are still glowing in the dark. As the stern rises high in the air, everything inside slips down the bow. Pianos, furniture, statues, paintings, dishes, luggage, every object on board crashes down and piles up. On the deck, there are still hundreds of passengers. They slant on the deck. It's so steep now they cannot stand straight. Some are clinging desperately to the rails. Others lose their grip and fall into the sea. It's a long drop, like a fall from a tall building. Those wearing life jackets are kept afloat, but the water is ice cold, and they will soon freeze to death if they're not rescued. The Titanic's lights flicker as she plunges, and then she's gone. People in the water scream for help, but their cries soon die down. The survivors huddle together, cold and afraid. Here in the North Atlantic, there is no first, second, or third class. The rich, the poor, the young, and the old are all in this together now. They are hoping to survive, none of them knowing what will happen next. The survivors in the lifeboats had rowed away from the ship. They feared that they would either be sucked down with the Titanic, or as she sank, or swamped by the people in the water. But now some of the sailors decide to row back to the floating wreckage of the Titanic. They want to see if anyone is still alive, but they row through hundreds of frozen bodies and find just 4 survivors. One dies shortly afterwards. It's almost dawn. The survivors have been at sea for several hours without food or water or warm clothing. Many are almost frozen to death. Suddenly they see rockets in the distance. Another ship is on its way. It is the Carpathia. Her crew had heard the Titanic's distress calls, but the ship was 58 miles away, a 3-hour trip. She had arrived too late to save the people in the water, but not too late to save the people on the lifeboats. The Carpathia raced through dangerous ice fields to be the first to arrive on the scene. One by one, the Titanic survivors board the Carpathia. Some climb a rope ladder, and others reach the deck of the ship. Others are too weak or too young to climb, are hauled aboard on cargo nets. Everyone is counted. Of the 2,206 passengers, only 705 people had survived. The Carpathia now heads for New York. The journey will take 3 days. Friends and relatives had been frantic for news. They are confused by the different reports. The Carpathia is not releasing any information, and newspapers are making up stories. One says that everyone survived, that the Titanic is being towed by another ship. Other newspapers said many had died. In New York, people wait anxiously for the Carpathia, hoping they will see their loved ones off on the ship. So the newspapers reporting about the event, but they don't really know what happened. At last, the Carpathia sails into the New York harbor. Nearly 30,000 people are lining the dock, among them many doctors and nurses to help the survivors, like Mommy. The gangplank is lowered from the Carpathia, and the few survivors walk down. People on the dock rush forward. Some call out the names of their relatives. Harold Bride, the only surviving wireless operator, is carried off the ship. His feet are badly frostbitten and been bandaged. Also among the survivors are 2 dogs. The heroes are presented this medal for their bravery and for helping save people's lives. Michael and Edmund Novertil are safe. they are being looked at by a survivor until they can be reunited with their mother, Marcel, in France. She did not know that they were on the Titanic. The children's father had been separated from the boys. He had told travelers that their mother was dead. Marcel recognized her sons from a photograph in a French newspaper telling the tragic story about the two orphaned boys. Mrs. Astor is among the survivors. She had helped to row her lifeboat away from the sinking Titanic. Out in the ocean, many ships are finding the bodies of victims. Many cannot be identified. Colonel Astor is identified. His initials were on his collar. Captain Smith's body is not found. Some reports say he was standing on the bridge before it sank. In the years after the Titanic, many people wanted to find her, but the location was a mystery. The technology didn't exist to find it. The Titanic had fallen into the sea down 12,000 feet. That's the height of 10 Empire State Buildings. More than 70 years passed. Then in 1985, a team led by Robert Ballard used an unmanned driving vessel called the Argo to put a video camera to send pictures back to the research ship. The explorers sent Argo down to the bottom of the ocean. After a day, they searched the seabed for signs of the wreck but saw nothing. Then one day, an object appeared on the monitor of the rescue research ship. It was an image of a huge boiler. The Titanic had been found by the research ship. Argo had sent pictures back. She had broken into two and her contents spilled across the seabed. 2 years later, another submersible, Nautil, visited Titanic. It was equipped with the latest technology, including movable video camera that could film inside the rooms. The Nautil had 2 robotic arms, which were operated by a pilot. The arms had different attachment that allowed the pilot to pick up various types of objects. The Nautil had brought back thousands of ordinary objects that were scattered over the seabed. Toys, eyeglasses, money, and jewels. They were all that remained of the Titanic's victims. On the dry land, the objects were carefully cleaned and restored so they could be displayed in the exhibitions. These objects helped tell the story of the Titanic and her passengers. The technology was also enabled to answer a question that had remained a mystery since the sinking. What really happened? The evidence showed the iceberg did not carve a 300-foot gash alongside the Titanic as they thought. Instead, it had made 6 small cuts below the waterline, which allowed the water to gush into the hull. By examining the wreck, they were able to also explain how she broke apart. The Titanic hits the iceberg, which hits the ship in 6 places, and water gushes through the narrow openings. The compartments flood, one after another. The weight of the water of the bow pulls the ship under. The front of the funnel collapses. The strain of the ship is so great that she breaks. The bow plunges to the bottom, and the stern starts to flood and then sinks. The lessons from the Titanic were that would the Titanic have sunk if it wouldn't have sailed full speed on the fatal night? All these issues were discussed, and safety regulations for passengers were passed. Ships had to carry enough lifeboats for everyone. Wireless operators had to listen to their radios all night long. A special airborne ice patrol was set up to help warn ships of dangerous icebergs. Never again would people dare call any ship unsinkable. The Titanic was a cruel lesson for everyone. This is Michelle Navarro talking to another survivor. The end.